Thank you all for being the participants for this particular breakout session. I'm Dr. Shruti. I'm a physiologist. I work in a private medical college in India. And my co-host, Dr. Tul, who just prayed after the main plenary session. He's an orthopedic surgeon from Tansen Mission Hospital from Nepal. It was such a great plenary session where LT sir, he tried to connect us by insisting that we need to develop God's nature. And even though while doing this, we are taken from security to insecurity, but we need to understand that there are self-giving experiences as we know the God of Trinity and understand how Jesus gave himself up as he sacrificed his life for us. So, it was very nice to know that he told that we have to learn to live with loose ends, which is basically our faith journey. It's my pleasure to announce to all of you, our dear panelists. We have Dr. Romola Ratnam from Sri Lanka and Dr. Johnny Oman from India. And they will be sharing one by one. First with Romola ma'am. Madam will be talking about the 3 objectives. And before that, let me introduce ma'am. Ma'am is working at the toxicology unit at a teaching hospital in Peradeniya, Sri Lanka. Ma'am is married, is blessed with 2 daughters, aged 18 and 20. And ma'am is a member of National Action Team of HCF Sri Lanka and the National Discipleship Coordinator. Ma'am, we are so privileged to have you here, and kindly give us the update about the 3 questions that what have you done with your life professionally? How did you make these choices? What guided you? What would your advice to the younger generation be? Your time, ma'am.
Thank you, Shruti, for that wonderful introduction. So I'm here to share with you what I have done with my life thus far professionally and how I made these professional choices. So those 2 would go hand in hand even as I speak. So like many of us, the familiar thoughts ran through my mind as well. What next after obtaining MBBS? Do I migrate or serve in Sri Lanka? But at the back of my mind, I knew I was privileged to obtain free medical education in Sri Lanka, maybe with the taxpayers' money, in order to serve our country. Do I start off immediately with post-graduation studies, choosing to stay in major cities with all facilities? If that was it, I was going to do psychiatry so that I would be able to interact with patients and help them through their struggles. Or the 3rd question that ran through my mind was, do I pursue my passion? Now, what was I passionate about? A couple of years before I passed out, my dad had bought a house and property in a beautiful scenic setting in the midst of a tea plantation, far away from all the major cities, where estate workers had minimum medical facilities. They had to travel far and face language barriers as they accessed medical care. Though initially I was annoyed with my dad for investing in such a place, far away from all these major cities, I later found myself developing a passion to work among this underprivileged group of people. I was able to understand God's strategic plan and sensed his guidance. In spite of having the option of choosing to do my post-intern working place in popular hospitals, I chose to work in a hospital among this underprivileged group, which was being upgraded to cater to the demands of the people of that area with a new operation theater, and there was a need for anesthetists, which was the only vacancy advertised. To be honest, that was the last thing I wanted to do, never be an anesthetist. But my mentors, my Christian mentors, kept telling me, even as I prayed with them, that being trained in anesthesia will make me a competent and skilled doctor later on in life. So I started my work as an anesthetist, being hopeful that after 2 years, I would be able to seek a transfer and pursue my post-graduation education in psychiatry. So while working here, I got married to my husband, a banker, who was actively involved in handling agricultural loans to these poor people and helping them earn their living. I was also involved in holding medical clinics and health education programs in remote areas. We had both our daughters while serving here. I was also able to care for my parents and grandma. The 2 years that we intended to stay here became 7 long years. My elder daughter started attending a preschool with the estate children, as there were no good schools. But at the end of the 7 years, while praying and seeking God, we experienced God's hand of intervention. Just with 2 weeks' notice, my husband was transferred out to a main city in the central part of Sri Lanka. That's where we are now. I had no choice but to follow him to a teaching hospital where I am now working. Again, as an anesthetist, since that was the only vacancy. Since I had completed my 7 years in anesthesia, I did my diploma in anesthesia and intensive care and found myself being confident and competent in this field. In Sri Lanka, every 4 years, we are given the choice of applying for transfers and choosing our units. So every time I thought I was going to leave anesthesia, but God guided me otherwise. The popular units or stations where we apply for transfers are those with less work and more overtime. But I chose to work in a children's hospital, continuing to be an anesthetist in the operation theater and in the intensive care unit, knowing that many people didn't want to work there, as pediatric anesthesia could be challenging and stressful. So this hospital was one of the 2 major pediatric hospitals in Sri Lanka, where many children, infants and neonates are transferred from the rest of the country, most of them having very lengthy hospital stay. Their parents had to undergo a lot of hardship, leaving behind little children at home and being so anxious and stressful, not knowing what is happening to their kids. Most of them had congenital abnormalities and had to undergo surgeries after surgery. So this gave me the opportunity to build rapport with these families, pacifying anxious mothers, and sometimes even introducing Jesus to them. Once again, I had completed 4 years there, and I had the choice of applying for a transfer. So this time, I was able to get into a unit, which was actually the unit of my initial passion. This is the toxicology unit. It is actually the only unit in Sri Lanka where patients with deliberate self-harm, those who poison themselves, who want to attempt suicide, are brought into. And we have our own intensive care. So after the initial vigorous intensive treatment, patients are also counseled, psychological referrals are done, and also social rehabilitation and counseling, which is a continuous process. So though I didn't pursue my education in psychiatry, I'm actually doing what I really wanted to do. Now, as a competent anesthetist, so I could really care for them with the initial intensive management. So this is where I am now. So if I am to tell you how I made all these professional choices, every time I had this choice of applying to a station or to a unit, I had two things in my mind. I made sure that I had enough time for God and family. I never engaged myself in private practice where even I had the opportunity to do so. I had to say no to it because I always thought I should balance my time with work and family. I also chose to work close to home so that I could take care of my children and my aging parents. I also chose units where my presence would make an impact in that unit. My ability and experience and skill would be used in a place that is most needed, not where I am comfortable. So my advice to you young people would be, don't follow the norm. The norm now is try to do less work, but get more money and more popularity. Try to choose units which will give you very little work, but which will give you enough time for your private practice. That's the norm. But my advice to you would be to choose specialities where you are most needed, where you could really give your best to it. Another norm now is to choose specialities that would give you more opportunities for migration. I was talking to a few young people recently, and they were going on saying that we chose this specialty because it has more opportunities for jobs overseas. But I don't think as children of God, that's how we should make our choices, right? My advice to you would be to ask this question: how can I serve God better? How can I give myself to the needy? And I think if you have that perspective in your minds, God will really guide you through. And I'm sure you could make an impact in the medical profession. I think my time is up, Shruti.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction that you gave about yourself under the 3 headings. And before my co-host introduces our next panelist, I would just like to announce to the audience that we have question answer sessions, and we will initially start with the questions which have already been shared during the registration, and they can feel free to text in the chat box, and we will put it across to the panelists. Over to Dr. Thul.
It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Johnny Uman. He's I don't know where to say he's from. He's from South India. Dr. Johnny Uman did MBBS in CMC Vellore because he was a staff kid. After that, he did bond, and his batch of 1980 MBBS batch, and then subsequently after finishing his bond, he went on to do community medicine in Vellore, and he went back to the not so very good state. It's a Bimaru state, Odisha, in Bisamkatak. So where he went and worked, and still he's working there, and in Bisamkatak with his wife Mercy. He retired recently, but is still working as an honorary consultant, and he's doing exemplary work in Bisamkatak. And some of my classmates had opportunity to visit his work, and they were really inspired. And every year, I think the medical student from CMC Vellore still continue to go there as a part of their mission posting during the summer holidays. So I'd like to ask Dr. Johnny Uman to speak to us.
Thank you, Dr. Thul and Dr. Shruti. And thank you, Dr. Amola. It was a pleasure listening to you. And such different circumstances, and yet the same truths we all seem to arrive at from various directions. And I'm terrible at timings, so please just cut off my mic when I've overshot. I'm perfectly okay with that. I'm going to share screen. I do PowerPoints mainly because I can't remember what I was going to say, and it's safer if I have it on slides. So can I share screen? Is that allowed, Shruti? Tol, can I do that?
Yes, sir.
Is that visible?
Absolutely fine. You're sharing already. Yeah, we can see.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I'm going to just do this because I've reached the stage in life where I start a sentence and I can't remember what I was going to say. So it's safer this way. We've been asked to answer 3 basic questions, and I'm going to try and do that. The first question in telling the story of my life is the question which was asked was what and how. What did you do and how did you do it? So I'm going to run through this with pictures because a picture is worth 1,000 words. I was born in this family. We are originally from Kerala, grew up in Tamil Nadu, now living in Odisha. My parents, my father's a pastor, my mother's a teacher. These are my 3 elder sisters, and I'm that little fellow sitting in my mother's arms at that point in time. My father was the chaplain at ICMDA, which is how we landed up there in 1964. I have 1 younger sister, but she was born 9 years too late to get included in this photograph. I joined medicine in 1990, as Tul was saying. Most of what I remember about college was extracurricular. Basketball, I couldn't live without playing basketball morning and evening. Sports, the Student Christian Movement, the Students Association. I also attended classes, but I wasn't a very good student. There were so many better things to do. So I'm afraid, I took a little extra time to finish because they loved me so much. They kept me another 6 months. That was such fun. In Vellore, we've got this terrific idea that you have to serve for 2 years after you finish, and then only they give you your certificates. They call it a bond. I call it finishing school. I got sent to this place called Bisamkatak in South Odisha. Good South Indian. My Hindi was terrible. I didn't know any Odia, but it was such a lovely year because it was everything I dreamt about. All those, dreams you had about why you want to do medicine, it was all falling into place at that point in time. So 1 year I thoroughly enjoyed myself, and then returned to Vellore to do an MD in community medicine. I got married. I needed to find a wife who was willing to go back to a place like that. It's one of the best parts of the country. Tul, you got it wrong. It is one of the most beautiful parts of the country, some of the best people, and I wouldn't choose any other place than this if I had to do it all over again. We got married. My wife, Mercy, is a nurse. She'd done a BSc and MSc nursing in Vellore, and we returned to Bisamkatak in 1993. This is a hospital which was started in 1954. It's a mission hospital of the Jaipur Evangelical Lutheran Church, which is a local church. And we are into patient care, nursing, education. We run schools for children and community programs. So it's such a beautiful place. People pay money to see these kind of places. We get it for free, and we get a salary as bonus at the end of the month. Mercy's work has been in nursing education, starting with an A&M school, building that on to a general nursing and now to a BSc program. And she's also the head of the nursing department and designing hospital buildings and all sorts of other things that are the fun parts of being in a mission hospital. My own work was in community health. Ours is a predominantly tribal population. In our block, more than 60% is tribal and about 15-16% is Dalit. So close to 80% are from the ST, SC community, scheduled caste communities, which are the 2 most vulnerable communities in the country. But one of the most beautiful places to work. So my first few years were going village by village, knapsack on your back, full of medicines, sometimes walking 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers a day, living the dream with the people who accepted me and owned me up and made my life worth living. Now, as we went along, we quickly realized that what I had been trained to do was mostly mother and child. What people were dying of was malaria. 1/3 of our deaths was due to malaria, and it made absolutely no sense to be, selling ice creams to the Eskimos. You had to do what was needed. So I had to learn about malaria. We struggled with it. We came up with an idea that we call the People's Movement Against Malaria, using neem oil as repellents, medicated mosquito nets, and treating malaria with chloroquine. There was a sharp fall in malaria within 1 year. WHO guys came running, asking us, what on earth did you guys do? And that gave us a little bit of traction. But life doesn't end there. We started doing community dreaming sessions. And one particular village, tribal village, which was doing a dreaming session, the gentleman on the extreme left, Judishi Saraka, the leader of that village, he told me, it is not enough what you are doing. Our children have to grow beyond this. And their dream was to have a school of their own. That would be according to the tribal culture, according to their language, according to their ethos, where the children are ashamed of their parents. I said it can't be done, but as often as not, I'm wrong. A year from when they made this dream, we started the school. This is in 1998. So you note the guy on the left and the guy on the right with a good lady in between. She was a medical superintendent. We are the two malnourished people on either end of the spectrum. So the school grew. It's going to be an Adivasi school. And this was just 10 days ago when the community decided to celebrate 25 years. And that was 3,500 people. And we danced and enjoyed ourselves as we look back on what has happened over these 25 years. When you have a little gray hair, they put you into administration. So I landed up having to try and run the hospital, design buildings, and have fun over the last few years. So the hospital now is about 200 beds. The College of Nursing, the schools, and so on is what we do. 31st of October, I retired because you hit 60 and it's time to do something else. But I'm still around because my wife has another year to go. So now my primary job is to teach children how to whistle. It's a fascinating profession. And to grow old with your friends. This is that same tribal leader. Now today, we both have started looking like each other and our stomachs are in competition to see who makes a bigger stomach. So now part 2, why did you do what you do? Why? Why did I do MBBS? At the age of 17, I was convinced that all that we have and all that we are is a gift from God to be used for others who did not get the opportunities we got. And that's why I did MBBS. It was a choice between medicine and journalism. I got this one, so I took it with only one objective, that this gives me the tools to be able to work for the people who didn't get the opportunities I got. Why MD Community Health? Working here, I realized that only 1% of people actually came to hospital. Most people died at home. And I wanted to do something about it and try to change the reasons why people fall sick. Why Bisankatak? It landed on my lap. I got sent there and it just fell into place. Why malaria? Why tribal education? Just like LT Jayachandran was telling us, you stay true and God gives you your agenda. You don't go searching for it. It turns up in front of your nose. You stay true and keep responding and stuff happens. Instead of asking why, I would ask why not. Okay, so what? So what do I say to you? I'd like to share with you some take-home lessons from life. One thing I've learned, God is real, God is good, God is faithful. You can trust and walk. Initially, I thought he was a psychotherapy job, but I jumped off the cliff. I found his hands underneath. The p-value is less than 0.001. It isn't chance. God is real. Lesson 2, I have learned at the age of 17, and I reiterate it now, we do not belong to ourselves. All that we are and all that we have are a gift from God to be used for others who did not get the opportunities we got. Lesson number 3, it isn't easy. I'm not fooling anybody. It's not easy. There are days you wonder why on earth you got into this, but it's worthwhile. And that's a choice. Me, I choose worthwhile. Easy would be a waste of life. And finally, may I say the operative verses that guide me. For me, the operative verses are these. Jesus says, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily and follow me. I totally agree with what LT said. It's a 3-point formula. Deny oneself, take up your cross daily. That includes night duties, and follow me. The methodology of doing this is what Paul tells us in Philippians 2:5-8. Your attitude should be the same as that of Jesus Christ, who did not consider equality with God something to be held on to, but emptied himself, took on the nature of a servant, was in appearance of a man, humbled himself and was obedient even unto death on the cross. That's the role model, and that's what we are called to follow. Thank you. Sorry, I overshot time by 2 minutes.
Thank you, sir, for speaking. Now the room is open for question.
I think even as we wait for more people to respond here on the chat box, you can either put it directly or you can put it across to me or to Dr. Tul. We will read it out for the panelists. And thank you so much, both of the panelists, for giving us such a clear-cut idea about what you are actually doing and what are your precious suggestions for the participants. So we already have few questions as they registered. So the first and very obvious question among the list is, what are the career choices after MBBS? Can this question be directed to Romola, madam?
Can I have the question again?
What are the career choices after MBBS? It's a straightforward question put across when they registered for the Zoom meeting.
Dr. Jani, you'd like to answer that?
Okay. I think it's a more confusing choice for the graduates of today. The options are far more. It's like the, when we wanted to buy coffee, there was only coffee. It was either black or white. Now you want to buy coffee, they give you 25 options. I think that career choices are a bit like that now. You have choices between, the gross areas of whether you want to be in patient care, you want to be in research, you want to be in teaching, or subsets of those. You want to take off on the sides and go off into artificial intelligence. I mean, the possibilities are immense. I don't think the problem is the lack of choices. The problem is in figuring out what you should do. And I don't think, like LT said, I don't think any of us should interfere between you and God. My conviction, what my parents taught me, is that our calling is to obedience, not necessarily to success. So be careful with the indicators and yardsticks you use to determine whether you're in the right place or not, or doing the right thing or not. I'm also conscious that given the present system of the NEET exam, you may not get what you want, but you may have to learn to want what you get. I argue there is no place where you can't be true. There is no place where you can't be happy. There's no place where you can't be unhappy. These are choices we make. And so I think it is good to dream. I tell my junior doctors to put down a list of their best choices from 1 to 25 or whatever they want. But finally, given the way the system runs, you may land up in a subject that you didn't actually initially want to take. But God can use you anyway.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving such a wonderful answer for that question. Even again, as we wait for the questions to come in the chat box, the next question is how the medical profession is going to be changed in coming years.
Romola, you're in a teaching hospital. That's yours.
Yeah, so I think, now there are a lot of specialties. I think earlier during our age, the specialties were less, but now more and more specialties are coming in. So I think like, for example, earlier it was like general medicine, but now even within general medicine, you get like little specialties coming up. So you will have a lot of options in the future. Yeah, so.
On the same question, the second half of the question was, how is AI going to impact the future of the medicine? I think artificial intelligence, how it's going to change the future of medicine.
Yeah, I don't think Sri Lanka has advanced so far to bring in artificial intelligence right away into medicine. But I think, yes, in the future it is going to.
Yeah, I was recently asked to speak at a conference on health data and AI at CMC Vellore. I don't understand why they asked me, because I had to study so hard to prove I didn't know anything about the topic. But I was speaking on behalf of the tech dumb, all of us who just are totally flabbergasted by the way technology is going. I think AI is here. I think AI in health is very much already around in more ways than we think. But I think it's going to grow at a huge speed. And there are huge challenges. There are huge challenges that lie in it. I'm not an expert. I can't even book a railway ticket online. So I'm the wrong person to say this, but I think there are going to be other questions. I think the fault lines are going to be much bigger. There's a line that I'll misquote from Matthew, which is, to him who has, more will be given. To him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. I feel that the gap between the haves and the have-nots, between the knowers and the not knowers, between the tech savvy and the tech restricted, is going to grow. And we're going to have a choice on where we're going to pitch our tent. Because I think it is inevitable, but there are going to be huge numbers of people who are left behind, for whom the AI guys only see them as data points, sources of data. They want our data. They don't want us. And I think we're going to have to fight rearguard action on that. But that's a long story.
Yes, sir. We have questions coming up on the chat, sir. This is directly directed towards you, John, sir. The question has come from India. As LT sir told, I know I have calling of working in missions, which I know and God knows. Sometimes people see me as fool if I tell them. But what I wonder sometimes is if I'm making myself look crazy by telling mentors that I will go to missions. Is it wrong in taking suggestions from them? And I'm worried if I can work so hard in missions, being a girl who can't work a lot.
Yeah.
Question?
One of the dangers of this medium is that it's so easy to look strong and intelligent and so on and so forth on Zoom. I want to tell you, I am an absolute scaredy cat, darpok. In Tamil we'll say, in Malayalam we'll say pedichuduri, bayandangoli. I'm scared of everything. I'm a lousy administrator because I think of worst case scenarios all the time. I don't think God calls us because of our qualifications or our strengths. I think his strength is perfected in our weaknesses. So he says, come not because you've got something to offer, but because you need me. So if you think you are inadequate, I think you're on the right track. I'm very scared of people who think God's answer to missions. They're very dangerous. People who are so certain of themselves. If you think you're inadequate, you don't think you're good enough, then you're the kind of material God uses. And I think over the years, we've seen this, that if anything has been possible, it's not because we were smart, but because we were willing. And I think that's far more important. Now, will you look like a fool? Why not? If you ask me, Jesus on the cross looked like a fool to everybody around him. You just think about it. 33 years old, the guru of his times, stuck on a cross, nailed to it, bleeding. Able to bring people back to life, but allowing himself to get killed. Everybody around him thought he was a fool. Even the thief on the next cross thought he was a fool. So if you think that people think you'll be a fool if you go on a mission, you're in good company. You're in very good company. We're not standing for elections. Popularity is not the name of the game. The question is not what everybody else thinks about you. The question is what God thinks about you. And that's the offer we have. There are no cushions on the cross. There's no way to sweeten the pill. but following Jesus is worth it. That's all I can say. So yes, some people will think you're a fool, but there's so much else. There's so many others who will think you will be grateful to you for what you do with your life. So it's okay.
So there's a continuation of the same question. The same doctor wants to know. So most probably I'll be working in mission hospitals for my lifetime. So is it good for me to work in missions after MBBS or finish off my PG and join missions for a long time?
First of all, I would like to argue that mission hospital must not be made a god or an idol in itself. Sometimes we are mistaking the church for the kingdom of God and mission hospitals for mission. God does not live only in mission hospitals. God also lives in the government. God also lives all over the place. Wherever people are in pain, God is there. So don't substitute obedience to God with loyalty to a mission hospital. That's a little tricky, right? Mission hospitals have a place in God's plan, but they don't have proprietorial rights on God. Yeah. So I think we need to be a little careful on that one. Is after MBBS or after PG, I personally feel that working a little bit after MBBS is a good idea. It shapes you out. It helps you to figure out what you really like and what you don't like. When we were in college, we liked a subject because that registrar was a nice chap, or was good looking, or treated you well. But only when you actually work, you figure out what you're good at. So to me, after MBBS is a great time to actually work for a year or two. I'm so grateful for the bond because it takes the choice away from us. But try your hand, get mud on your hands. And you really learn medicine only from your patients. You have to cry when your patient dies. You have to cry because you felt you didn't do your best. That's where you really learn the joy of medicine. And that's where you figure out what PG to do. Can God use you before MBBS? I mean, before PG? Yes. Can He use you after PG? Yes. Is PG necessary? I think it is. I think postgraduate training will help you in a variety of ways to actually be more effective over time. But very often I find when young people ask this question, it is basically to get out of making a decision. Forgive me, I'm being rude. Very often it is to postpone the decision. And by the time you've done your PG, you've got married and you have 2 children, and now the strings attached to decision-making become far more complex. So I'd suggest jump after MBBS. Get into the flow, get into the mud. And from there, ask God what He wants of you. This is my personal opinion, but obviously God can do it differently for each person.
I think you answered the question posted, which is a post-graduation necessary to serve God? Should I work for a while before I decide? Thank you so much, John, sir. The next question in the chat, which is, how did you manage your time with God during med school? Can we know to whom is this directed?
Since I work closely with medical students, I think I can answer this.
Yes,
yeah, so many students actually, they struggle with this issue. But if you really get your priorities right, I don't think you need to struggle with this. You should really know how you prioritize it. Because like, if you want to get up at 5 o'clock and study, you can always get up at 4:30 and give that time to God. I don't think you need to compromise. And I used to always tell the students, it needs to be a lifestyle. You don't have to have this particular time in a box saying this is my time, my quiet times, and the rest of the time. Right throughout the day, you can be in communication with God by even walking from your hostels to your university or to your lecture halls. You can still communicate with God. So I don't think you need to compromise your relationship with God. Have I answered that question?
Absolutely. I totally agree with you, Romola. I think our entire lives over time. You need the time set apart to remind you that entire 24 hours is God's time. Like LT was saying about how you look at money. You give your tithe 10%, not to say 90% is mine, but you put aside 10% to remind you that all 100% belongs to God. You put aside Sunday to remind you that every day belongs to God. And therefore, in medicine, we are so privileged that throughout our lives, people in pain come to us. And every interaction is a prayer. You find God in the work situation. Yes, you need those times apart to reset, to think through, to reflect. But if you can't find God in the wards, you won't find him in the chapel.
Very well said, sir. We'll go to the next question. Very interesting one. The question says, I belong to vaccination department, and 4 years ago, there are some people who refuse to get vaccinated from religion point of view. Some are Muslim and some are Christians and from other religions. How I can convince in religious or biblical, theological point of view?
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure I have a clear answer to this. Vaccines are not mentioned in the Bible directly. But I believe that science is not against God, that science is also a gift of God. Science is actually the process of discovering God's creation more and more. Science can get it wrong. We can distort the picture, but the process is the same. So are all vaccines right? I'm not necessarily sure. But the anti-science movement using religion, I think, has got it terribly wrong. And I think, personally, if somebody chooses to go that way, that's their choice. I don't think you should force anybody to be vaccinated. I don't think those are mandatory. But however, I think we need to convince people that the God is there as well. God is in science as well. God is in healthcare as well. We also have people who refuse blood transfusions on religious grounds. We have people who refuse treatment on religious grounds. I think they have that choice. But I have a problem with the anti-vaccine groups that are so strong, lobby groups. And I'm also part of WhatsApp groups, which you get these crazy messages that are terribly anti-science, that have no logic behind them. Part of the problem is this information overload that is hitting us. Critical thinking is totally lost in the process. I suggest that God is true in the classroom, outside the classroom, in the lab, outside the lab, that he's true here and there. And but I think we'll have to find a theology of vaccines if you have to answer them. But I don't think you can answer them that way anyway, because if somebody decides not to understand, there's very little you can do to get him to understand. We can just hope and pray they get it right. That's my take, but I know it's not a proper answer.
Not possible, Dr. John, yeah. In fact, I like a statement that Francis Schaeffer made. All truth is God's truth. Whether it's truth about vaccines, truth about the law of gravity, whereas we have put God into the supernatural. In fact, the Jewish idea is the supernatural and the natural have an overlap, whereas we have put supernatural and natural in opposite compartments. I think that is our biggest problem.
I think, Tanveer, your question has been answered. Thank you so much to the panelists. We'll move on to the next question. Abhineet wants to know what can be our strengths and weaknesses? What should we consider the most as being in a medical field?
Okay. I suggest we work for a king. Our work is our worship. You cannot be mediocre. We have to do our very best. So to me, competence is a requirement. Excellence is a calling. The excellence may be situational excellence. The excellence in my village may be different from the excellence in a city in material terms. So that's why I call that situational excellence. And I would combine that with social relevance. Here I say situational excellence is asking the question, is this the best I can do for my patients or my students in this situation? Social relevance is asking the question, will this make a difference to the poor? Because if you pursue excellence alone, you become irrelevant. You pursue relevance alone, you become mediocre. And you'll have to hold these two together in dynamic tension. So one, I would suggest as Christian health professionals, competence in what we do both in terms of knowledge, in terms of skills, in terms of values. These are non-negotiable. I don't think I can say, I have this junior doctor, he's terrible at his work, he can't get his diagnosis right, but he's a lovely Christian. That's not on. That's not on. Two, along with competence, I think is compassion. Now, the definition or the meaning of compassion means, sorry, my lights went off, doesn't matter. Compassion means to suffer with or to share the pain of our people. I think that a Christian doctor has to cross the table. You don't sit on your side of the table, you cross the table to the other side and share the pain of your patients. Therefore, it is not just being objective, which is important, but also being willing to see things from the patient's side. So I would say competence and compassion are two really strong requirements as Christian doctors. Willingness to see no task as too small for us, no task as too big for us. Medical doctors, there's a problem. People treat us like gods, and after some time, we start believing them. Very, very dangerous. We are just normal human beings. We may die before the patient. You never know. And therefore, we need to get off this demigod status act. And I don't see anything in my MBBS which stops me from being able to sweep the room or clean the drain or unclog the toilet.
Amen.
I don't see anything in the MBBS course which stops me from doing that. And therefore, I argue that as doctors, society puts us on top of the food chain. But Christ doesn't allow us to do that. So that cleaning staff is as valuable as you are. And if you will just help him clean the drain once, it raises the standard of his job. Watch Munna by MBBS if you want to learn that. There is no task too small for us. Therefore, I'm just saying, just throwing things. You asked what you prioritize. I would say competence, compassion, willingness, humility, the fruits of the spirit. I mean, they're absolutely relevant to the practice of medicine. We are called to be good at what we do, and we are called to do it with kindness and with grace. Do I measure up to those qualities? No. I fall flat on every one of them. But yes, we are sinners, but we are forgiven sinners. We are headed the right direction. We may not be anywhere near the 100%. We may be closer to the 10, but we're still headed in the right direction. And that's what the game of life is about.
Thank you, sir. Abhineet, thank you so much for asking that question, because we got a wonderful answer from Johnny, sir. We'll move on to the next question. The question is, how to choose between working in abroad or in the country you are already living in? As I'm in a situation where most of my family members are already settled in US, but I want to settle here and work and serve here. But this family pressure is making me confused to decide. Within brackets, I've recently completed MBBS.
Now that's the fashion, everybody wants to migrate because I think people think the green pastures are in the West, but there's nothing wrong in migration. But I think it's just to be sensitive to what God is really wanting you to do and serve where God wants you to serve. So being sensitive to the voice of God, I think will help us make a clear decision. There's nothing wrong in migration, but I think geographically God has placed us in a place. So you first be a witness to God in Jerusalem, then to Judea, and then to the entire nation. So I think if there's a need in where you are staying, you might have to respond to that call. But well, again, it's individualized, and God is a God of universe. Boundaries are actually man-made. So I think it's just to obey the voice of God. It might be different for each person. So I think we just need to be sensitive to his voice.
Thank you, Romola ma'am. We'll move on to the next question. Some medical ethics, for example, about abortion, it is not according to biblical way. So if someone teaches me about it or anything, any article on it, I tend to skip to listen to them so often. Is this way good, or how can I handle such discussion or any other things that are not according to the biblical way that are taught in our medical school?
May I take that question, Shruti?
Sure, sir. That's a privilege.
Okay. You know, in the book of Exodus, the midwives told a lie in order to save the lives of boy children, and God blessed them. You know, what happens is when two absolute values are on a collision course, one value becomes more important than the other. That's why you have that in the Bible. And God bless them and so on. So we are beginning to see that. And as I said earlier, we do not put a natural, supernatural into two opposite compartments. We look at them together because God is the God of nature. He's also the God of supernature. So we have to understand that. Very often that kind of misses us, and that's why we cover ourselves with confusion. So you could think about it, the people who are part of this group.
Can I jump in as well? Thank you, LT sir, for that one. I think, it's so interesting when people talk about ethics in medicine. We jump quickly to the question of abortion and euthanasia.
Correct.
But there are a lot of other ethical questions.
Correct, I know.
I studied my MBBS in CMC Vellore. I paid 3,000 rupees fees as tuition fees. The remaining cost of 1 lakh a year or whatever was paid by patients who sold their land, their goats, their houses to pay the bills. I studied on their money. Okay. Now I walk away from this. Where is the ethics in that? I am a debtor to the people of India. At least if you study in a government hospital, the taxpayer paid. I studied in a place like CMC Vellore where it is the poor patient who paid their bills, who paid my fees. Now, where is the ethics in this? Where is the ethics in medicine that commercializes so much? And so the cost of care for our patients is driven by the doctor's demands for salary. Where is the ethics? Where is the ethics where I refuse to do a surgery for a patient because they say they don't have the money for it? So see, we are playing games. I'm not walking away from the abortion question. I'm saying God is true throughout. We live in an extremely unethical practice. Junior doctors tell me that in their medical colleges, their job was to produce fake charts every day. Say 10 fake charts per day so that the college can show to the National Medical Council that there were this many patients who were admitted. From the name of the patient to the end, it is fictitious. Their professors teach them to do this. Which ethics are we talking about? So this is the tragedy. We are training our students to be unethical, to be dishonest. And then just because there's a conflict of interest question or research, we bring up some ethics in research. Artificial ethics. Because every day in our practice, we are unethical. So every time I turn away a patient who didn't have the money, I have to ask myself some basic questions. So I'm just throwing the idea of ethics in medical practice much broader, saying that every day we face those questions. And if I'm ethical in one thing, I have to also be ethical in the others. So I suggest look at ethics in healthcare with a much broader space, not just the bioethics part, but the commercialization, the corruption in our health systems, and our willing partnership in that game so that my stomach is filled, not filled, overflowing at the cost of others. I don't know. So I just throw the question backwards. So sorry, I have no idea who asked the question. No, nothing against anybody, but I'm just throwing it open because we as healthcare practitioners, we have to be accountable for what we have done to our patients.
Yeah, I think that applies to the ethics of migration as well, because in Sri Lanka, your medical education is free, and I think it's just paid by the people. So after receiving this free education that is actually given for serving the country, whether you need to migrate is really, again, a question of ethics.
I agree.
Thank you, both the panelists and also LT sir. Dr. Tul, did you receive any questions which in the chat box?
No, that's all. I think we finished most of the questions.
Yeah, are there any other questions? You can just unmute yourself also and ask. So if presently there are no questions, there's a very interesting question which was put up during the registration. It says, is studying so much worth it? 4 question marks. If you are not sure, you want to or can do it. If you are not sure, you want to or can do it. That's what it says. Is studying so much worth it?
We all ask that question during study holidays just before the exam. But is the practice of medicine worth it? It's worth the hassles of that training period. Very often, very little connection between what you study and what you actually do finally. But the process is worth it in my mind because the practice of medicine is divine. You know, I understand that wherever there is pain, God is present. When you touch people in pain, you touch God. And they walk through the gate to us every day. And therefore, if you have to go through 4 years of biochemistry and microbiology and whatever else it takes to get there, sorry, physiology as well, Shruti, I'm just, I mean, whatever it takes to get there is worth it. And all of this, totals up at the end of it all. So somewhere halfway through MBBS, it feels like it isn't worth it because you don't know why on earth you got into this. But if you stick to it, I think it is worth it. But that's a personal take, yeah.
There was another question. Yes, Dr. Tul, you want to say something?
If there is one more question, that should be our last because I think others are waiting in the main session, I think.
Okay, yeah. So you want to ask? Or
No. The one question, last question, you can read.
Okay, so we'll have the last question here, which asks about surgery in USA, USMLE. That's it. The question ends there. Surgery in USA, probably the participant wants to ask, is it worth doing surgery in USA through USMLE?
Do they want to have a surgery or they want to study surgery? Oh, they probably want to study surgery. Okay.
Probably.
Yeah. I think it's not a question of what you want out of life. The fundamental question you have to ask yourself is who do you belong to and what do you want out of life? And I'd say write the answers down because we fool ourselves with thoughts in our heads. Ask yourself the question, what Jesus asked John's disciples, what seekest thou? What are you looking for? Put that down in writing and then work according to that plan. We are fooling ourselves in between by the games we play in our heads. But may I suggest, like Tul said, Shruti, all health professionals are sick of waiting for the doctors to arrive. So maybe we should join the plenary.
Okay. I think time has come to thank all the participants who joined, who registered, who were with us all throughout the plenary, the wonderful plenary session that LT sir gave us. Sir, thank you so much for touching our hearts.
Yeah.
So I think we all agree that it was really a wonderful session by LT sir. And thank you, Romola ma'am, for taking us through your beautiful journey. Very, very informative and very encouraging to all the youngsters who joined. And equally at par was Johnny sir's PPT and the beautiful way both of you put across your life choices and gave it across to the youngsters. And I thank Dr. Tul for being the co-host for this session, all the participants. And shall we close with prayer? Maybe we can ask LT sir to close this session in prayer.
Father, we want to thank you for this amazing journey. We know, Lord, this is a good world which has gone bad. And that is why when we come across these questions, there are no clear-cut answers. But we begin to see that in your sight, both the qualitative and the quantitative are equally important. And help us, Lord, not to throw the baby out along with the bathwater. So guide us in our thinking. And we just pray, dear Lord, that as we hone our minds to understand some of these issues, you would teach us from your word, teach us by your spirit, so that we would be able to minister to the younger generation. We ask this prayer in the precious name of our Lord Jesus. Amen.